Hello. Ooh, there we go. I'm Pastor Mike. When's the last time some of you been in church, huh? Yeah, don't worry. I'm not going to preach. But I am going to welcome you on behalf of Manhattan Beach Community Church, South Bay Families Connected, Penny Camp Elementary School, Pacific Elementary School, South Bay Pony Baseball, and Manhattan and Hermosa AYSO. We are all joining forces to provide this free event featuring John Sullivan, an international TEDx speaker and founder of the Changing the Game project. Tonight, John's going to share some of his best. I don't think that has a good battery. I'm going to go with this one. There we go. He's going to share some amazing tips tonight and how your children can have a good sports experience. He'll discuss the myths that drive what he calls the race to nowhere in sports, and how you can best support your children to excel on the field, develop character, find joy in their sporting experiences, so it can be a positive, life-changing experience for all involved. You get your work cut out for you tonight, if you pull all that off, right? And I'm sure you will. So be sure to tell your friends that if they missed tonight, they have other opportunities to hear John tomorrow. And for more event information, you can just get on southbayfamiliesconnected.org. Also, a recording of this event is going to be available through email in the following days. So if you ask questions, be careful what you say. Be on your best behavior, like I know you are on the sidelines, right? John's also going to have his books available for purchase and signing this evening, so please stick around. And if you are a pony baseball parent, raise your hands. Yeah, all of you have access to a raffle in which the winner will get out of snack duty for the entire season. So what a deal for $20. So there are raffle tickets back there. I do want to have one shameless plug. I'm part of the Leadership Manhattan Beach class this year, and we are creating a pantry for single moms. And it's not just any pantry, it's a pantry out of Richstone, thank you, that is specific to fruit and vegetables to really help provide nutritional food for single moms and their children. So if you're interested at all in supporting that effort, Amy, who should get some kudos tonight, Amy's part of the reason why we're part of the co-hosts here, because 4 years ago, was it? 4 years ago, yeah, she got this idea in her head to try to get John to come here. And then as it turns out, he was coming for some other reasons, and we just joined forces. So actually, Amy had the vision for this event 4 years ago. So anyway, can we give it up for Amy? And let's hear it for John O'Sullivan.
Thanks, John. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Pastor Mike. I am in a church. I do believe in miracles, so here we go. Thank you all for coming and carving out some time this evening. I know how hard it is when you have children and maybe you have multiple children and they're at different events at different times. And so what I'm so excited about this trip, Amy coordinated with all these different groups to put on an event tomorrow morning and tomorrow evening so that hopefully we can reach as many people as possible. But I'm excited to be here. It was awesome. I got in this morning. I live in Bend, Oregon, so I'm walking around looking at everyone who lives here in puffy coats. I'm like, this is the warmest I've been in a really long time. So it was great to be here. My organization, my background, I grew up in New York, was a multi-sport kid, ended up playing college soccer and some pro soccer for a while, got injured and got into coaching, and I coached some NCAA Division I college. I was a head coach for WPSL women's team, and then a lot of youth, and I still coach today. I just turned 51, and I got to pass off. I have 47 8 and 9-year-old kids that I coach right now in this little program in Bend. And so I love that, and I love being around sports, and I've done this long enough now that I've seen so many kids grow up and move on and now come back and maybe coach for the club that I'm part of in Oregon. But more importantly, see the powerful and the positive impact of sports on their life and what they do. So about 10 years ago, I got out of coaching full time and started Changing the Game project. And now we get to work with all these amazing organizations around the world, because this isn't an American problem or a soccer problem or a baseball problem. The dropout rate in sports is it's really, really a worldwide issue, and especially since COVID. It's even been exacerbated. So hopefully tonight what I'd like to do is give you a couple of ideas of how you can be, whether you're a coach or a parent or both, how you can just give a little more ownership and create a little more enjoyment and stuff for the kids. Now, my journey started now my daughter is 17, but this was her 6-year-old soccer team, the Mighty Unicorns. I heard a lot of you are AYSO coaches, so you've all coached your version of the Mighty Unicorns, right? There's the giant blob, and they chase the ball around, and it doesn't matter what goal they score, and they're equally excited. And the parents are positive, and the coaches are positive. There's no referees to yell at, and it's just great. And so I'm watching the Mighty Unicorns play, and right next door there's a 10-year-old boys, quote, competitive soccer game. And it's not competitive because the kids are trying harder. It's competitive because all the adults are competing harder. And I'm watching this, and they're all yelling at the kids, and the coaches are yelling at the kids, and the parents are yelling at the kids, and everyone's yelling at the ref, and he's like 12, right? And I'm thinking, this is nuts. Like, does anyone on my field thinking, wow, I hope in 4 years we can spend way more time and way more money so our kids can have less fun, right? And that's kind of how Changing the Game project was born. So let me ask you, like, your kids, age range, who has elementary school kids? All right. Middle school, high school, college. Okay. Who's married to someone childish? No, I'm joking. That would be my wife raising her hand there. Why do your kids play? Why do they play? Why do they play sports? Why do they sign up? You make them sign up? Maybe. Time with friends? I didn't hear that one. Be with friends? Yeah. To be fun. I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? When they ask children, why do you play sports? Because it's fun. But do we know what really makes it fun? We just hit a couple of those things, right? So there's some really interesting research around why children play. This woman named Amanda Visick from George Washington University, she asked a whole bunch of kids age 8 to 18, why do you play? And fun was the number one answer. So she was the first one who said, well, what's fun? What makes sport fun? And so she asked them to come up with 81, they came up with 81 different things that made it fun. Here's the top 6, right? Trying hard, when the coach treats the player with respect, getting playing time, God forbid you get in the game, playing well as a team, getting along with teammates, exercising, and being active. That's what drives the joy of it. Now, further down the list, winning was number 48 on the list. Now, I've coached 30 years. I've never coached a game where there was 47 things more important than winning. Never. But apparently sometimes it is to kids. I remember when my daughter there was 10, I took her to her first travel soccer tournament. And so we were in Portland, Oregon, and I'm not coaching, I'm just watching the game, and they were awful. They lost like 10-0. And I'm watching, and the game ends, and I'm totally like embarrassed, and I'm a little bit angry, but I'm going to be a good dad. And my poor daughter, she's just going to be devastated. And so the game ends, and they walk across the field, and I'm like, hey, Mag, how you doing? You okay? She goes, Dad, the hotel has a pool. Right? All right, let's go swim. Right? So this idea of joy and what drives it doesn't mean that kids shouldn't compete or they shouldn't try hard or whatever. But oftentimes, right, as soon as that game ends, what do they want to know? What's for lunch? Right? Like they're hungry. What's that? Yeah, whatever it is. Right? They move on quickly. Often as a coach, I'm the one who struggles to move on from that moment. So I think it's so important that we always remember that it has to come back to joy. right? Joy drives everything. Now, through the podcast that we run and everything like that, we get to talk to some of the best coaches in the world, multiple time NBA champions, World Cup champions, NCAA titles, and they all still talk about joy, that it's got to be about joy if people are going to continue, even at the highest levels of sport. I think then it's really important to think about, well, why kids quit, right? What makes them sort of drop out, right? And I think there's a couple of big things that take away the ownership and take away the enjoyment of sport. And so I want to break those down for you. Now, I forgot to say this before, but if you, at any time here, if you have a question, please raise your hand. That's actually way more fun for me if we have a little more back and forth. I'd rather not sit here and just talk for an hour. But I'll give you some moments and call, but please ask questions if you want. So, why do kids quit? Here's one of the number one reasons they quit. He's very good, right? So the push to specialize really, really young. More, younger, right? And it's really hard, and especially in communities like this, where if you don't get in right away, it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If you're not in the 7-year-old baseball team, there's no way you make the 8-year-old baseball team. It's really hard to sample lots of sports and everything like that. Yet what all the research shows is that children who pick one sport very young are far more likely to burn out, drop out, and quit. They have 50% higher injury rates, way higher rates, especially overuse injuries and things like that. And that most of the people who make it to the top levels of sport actually have a much more well-rounded multi-sport background. Now, every sport is different, right? Every sport is different. There are some sports that are definitely what we would consider early specialization sports. Does anyone know what some of those are? Sorry, what was it? Gymnastics is one, especially for females. Golf, for some, not for all. I mean, you need a lot. What else? Yeah, figure skating is a big one. Yeah, equestrian, I don't know. I've never talked to the horses. Maybe. What was that? Yeah, like ice hockey, because there's that. Soccer. Some sports need a lot of reps, but for most sports where athletes hit their peak in their 20s, what they need early on is a well-rounded athletic development. They need a multi-sport movement, a multi-movement childhood. This is so important. And people say to me, "Well, my kid only likes soccer," or "My kid only likes this." I'm like, my kids when they're 7 only liked pizza, but I knew that they needed some vegetables too. So I realized that sometimes we get, like, how many of you, like, honestly, show of hands, feel like, oh man, I hear what you're saying, but it's almost impossible. Yeah, I would say that's like. So here's what I tell you: if your son or your daughter or your kids are going down this pathway where they're really only getting one, they still need a multi-movement experience. If they just play baseball, they still need to learn how to move, and it doesn't have to be a multi-organized sport experience, right? But biking and jumping on a trampoline, and I think every kid should do like gymnastics for non-gymnasts, right? Learn to tumble and move your body and things like that. Surfing, obviously, swimming, whatever it is, but they need multi-movement. If you go to these big sports clubs around the world, they're sports clubs, right? If your child was a soccer player at Manchester United, they'd be doing parkour and judo, right, and gymnastics, right? They teach them to be athletes first. So in this country, we channel a lot of children into a lot of the sport and not the athletic and the multi-movement development. And that's not for I'll get you one sec. That's not because that's best for kids. That's oftentimes because it's best for the business of sport, right? Yes, ma'am.
Might do only water sports, so they will swim and do water
Yeah, I mean, I think we're always finding that balance. I don't know if you heard. She said a lot of people in this community do mostly water sports. So I think it's finding that balance of what does your child want to do, right? And what's driving them? And for some, and I think it's kind of a small percentage, they get really, really, really driven. But then for others, they want to do these other things. So what you want to think about is the repetition of specific movement patterns over and over and over is what causes those overuse injury. So swimming in the ocean, or maybe paddling a surfboard and playing water polo, or swimming or things like that, those are still using your shoulders. Those are still using the same sort of muscles where you have to be careful, I think. So as long as you're getting that but putting that kid on a skateboard or something changes it up a bit. Yeah. Any questions on that? Because this is an important one. And this is, I think, one of the hardest ones as parents to navigate is the science says be a generalist, and the world tells us be a specialist, right? But that generalists oftentimes, they don't progress fastest, but they stick with it the longest, and they end up better at the end. So this is really important. All right. Number 2, a lack of patience and an early emphasis on results. All these kids are 12, right? A 12-year-old boy can have a 5-year developmental age swing, which means he could have the body of a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old. Now, you'd never play your 10s against your 15s, but go out to a 12-year-old soccer game or a baseball game. Like, I know there's lots of baseball people here, right? Every summer, I watch the Little League World Series, right? And every summer, there's some star kid that everyone's talking about, and what an incredible baseball player. And I'm like, he has a mustache, right? So it's not just about calendar age, it's about developmental age, and everyone grows at different times. Now, I found this video, a rugby video here, and what I ask you here is this kid 10?
Go, buddy! Go, buddy! Woo! Yeah! Go,
So we kind of get the point, right? I like the kids in the blue, like they're running just close enough to them that their dad won't yell at them. But they're like, there's no way I'm tackling that kid. Right? So there's so many stories in sport of the late developer and the person who's overlooked early on. And so I think one of the hardest things to do as a parent is just to keep that perspective that this is a long journey. I think one of the things we really struggle with as a society is we look at sports as this journey that's over when people are 18. How different would it be if we looked at it and said, you're going to swim until you're 70, right? You're going to play golf until you're 70. You're going to do these sports your whole entire life, and this is just a small slice. Would we treat it differently than if we just said, oh, we got to cram it all in right now, right? And so we really, really, really have to just be careful when we look at kids around us and our own that are maybe doing better than our own kids, and well, why are they? Are they an early developer? We also have this thing called relative age. Anyone know what relative age is? Anyone heard this term? It basically discusses where you are born in terms of the arbitrary calendar cutoff for your sport, right? So if your sport has a cutoff like soccer or hockey of January 1, a child who's born in the first 3 months of the year is far, far, far more likely to be identified as talented than someone who's born in the last quarter of the year, right? In every sport, this study has been replicated, right? My daughter was a December birthday, so until she was 15, she was like the 33rd tallest in her soccer age group of 2 teams, and then all of a sudden she grew, right? So relative age is something that affects schools. The earlier we pick, the more likely we are to get it wrong, right? And if you go to any sort of youth sport type selection tryout, and someone's picking an A team, and the kids are 12, 11, 10, you can pretty much go in with just a birth year calendar and probably get 85% of it right without even watching the kids play, right? Just because that the younger they are, the bigger the difference it makes, right? So really waiting until after puberty and after people grow is the biggest thing. Now there's a fascinating new book out, just came out a couple weeks ago, called Good for a Girl. Has anyone seen this book yet? This book is unbelievable. It's written by a woman named Lauren Fleshman, who is a professional runner, and it's already a New York Times bestseller. She was a national champion at Stanford, and then a professional runner. And basically, the whole book is about how we've created a whole sports system, and all the research and all the science is done on men. And then we've said, well, it's just, it'll work for women too. But what we do know is what happens when boys hit puberty. They sort of go on this upward trajectory. And oftentimes when girls hit puberty, they plateau for a while as their bodies change dramatically, and then they go back up. And so girls hit puberty in middle school and they plateau for a while, and then what happens is we go, oh, well, they're not getting any better, so we get rid of them and we cut them, or they get driven out of sports. And so girls quit at a much, much higher rate than boys around that age of 13 and 14, right? So fascinating book about the model and the need to really look at girls in sport completely different than boys in sport, and be patient, okay? Any questions on that? I must be doing pretty well here. And then the other thing that I think sometimes drives kids out of sport is, are we interfering with their experience? Are we stealing the reps from them? And so I want to do a little test with you all. And this is a very often repeated psychological test. It's called the Stroop test. It was invented by this guy, John Ridley Stroop, in 1935. And what he hypothesized and proved is that when you add cognitive interference, it slows down physical reaction time to the task, okay? So this is a 2-part test. We're going to do it as a room. And I'll, do well here, and I'll tell everyone tomorrow that you were really fast at this. So, all right. So this is Stroop test part 1. Out loud, as a room, as fast as you can go, we have to read all 4 lines: green, yellow, purple, red, blue, yellow, all down to the bottom. I'll time it. I didn't say go yet. Hold on. I gotta get my wrist chronograph right here. All right. So out loud as a room, as fast as we can go. The record's like 8.5 seconds, just in case you're competitive. All right. On your mark, get set, go. That's pretty good. 9.32. Do it again. Exactly. So overall, that wasn't so bad, though. Did anyone have, the person, next to you or whatever was loud? Yes, ma'am, pointing at him, right? So someone's loud, or they're a little bit ahead of you. What happened in that moment? It threw you off, right? It threw you off. So this little tiny bit of cognitive interference throws you off. But overall, that's pretty easy. All right. Stroop test part 2. Yeah. Same word, same font. Now, instead of reading the word, you have to say the color. So blue, red, green, blue, yellow, blue. All right? You guys need to stretch or anything? You ready? All right. So out loud as a room, as fast as we can go. All 4 lines. On your marks, get set, go. Okay, so that was not 9.32. Be honest now, raise your hand if you quit. There we go, look at that. So all of a sudden we add this cognitive interference, and it just slows down physical reaction time of a task. I think this is what it feels like when you're a kid trying to play soccer or hockey, and what are all the parents on the sideline yelling? Shoot it, kick it, pass it, right? Score, right? One coach on this side and 32 on the other, right? Now, when I speak to schools and I ask kids, I'm like, what would you like your parents to say on the sideline of your game? What do you think they say? Nothing. Everyone knows that, right? I've yet, 10, 11, going on 11 years of giving these talks, I've yet to have a kid ever say, it's super helpful when my dad yells at the ref. Right? So what happens oftentimes is we create a sideline that feels like that. And the kids don't know, who do I please, my coach? Do I please my mom or my dad? Right? And then they just stop. Now, if you think of a sport like soccer, like hockey, like lacrosse, rugby, any of the water polo, any of these fast-moving sports, right? In a split second, right, the athlete on the field has to perceive what's going on around him or her, right? Come up with possible solutions, pick one, technically execute it, assess their choice, and do it again. Like this, like this, like this. So they can't actually take any input from the sideline. When I've been to Manchester United, they have a rule for their youth coaches: we don't coach when the ball's rolling, right? Or we coach people off the ball. So this is so important. And I think one of those things that we can change on our sidelines is, can they just be quiet? It doesn't mean you can't cheer. Please cheer, right? Just don't coach. Don't give instructions, right? That's what kids ask for, right? That's what they want. Be there, be engaged, pay attention, but don't do that, right? And we know it makes sense, like everywhere else in our kids' lives, right? Who's been to a middle school band concert? Yeah, they're a little tough sometimes, right? Right? Have you ever heard like a parent yell out like, the woodwinds are killing us tonight? No, because we get it. We know, okay? All right. So these are the things that cause dropout: loss of joy, loss of ownership because of early specialization, things like that, loss of patience in the developmental journey, right? The fact that our kid was born in the wrong month for the sport he or she chooses to do, and so they're just disadvantaged for a while by age, right? These are the things that cause a lot of dropout. So how can we do it? Is that yes? Question? What can you do about the calendar and the cutoff? This is fascinating. So I think a couple of things. Number one, we want to encourage our programs to develop as many kids as possible for as long as possible in the best environment possible. The worst thing we could do is identify 9, 8-year-old kids and be like, these are the chosen ones. It's the absolute wrong thing to do, right? So giving good coaching and good facilities and things to as many kids as possible, grouping them so that kids get access to good coaches. One of the big changes, I don't know if ice hockey's big at all in this community or anything like that, but one of the things that USA Hockey did about 15 years ago was they dropped national championships. They got rid of checking before the age of 12. But they also started using ice time better because ice was really expensive, and doing station work, so all the kids got access to all the coaches, and it wasn't just the luck of the draw whether you got a good coach. And they made these changes, and everyone said, oh, you're going to ruin hockey, it's going to be terrible. And their retention rate of 9-year-olds who were still playing hockey when they were 14 went from 60% to 91%. They kept people in the sport. Right? And they let them grow, and they let them hit puberty, and then figure out who's going to make it and who's not. Okay? So that's one of the ways that we can do it. Number two, as a parent, just know this. And if your son or, if your children are calendar disadvantaged, just be patient, right? Just be patient. I mean, like, one of the interesting sports is swimming, because swimming, you compete against whatever age you are, right? Do we have anyone who's got swimmers in here? One? Okay. Yeah. So swimming, so every year in swimming, you're one of the oldest and then you're one of the youngest, right? But everyone else just disadvantages people or advantages people all year long. So just be patient and know that, hey, your kids are going to grow, or your kids are going to do this. And the only one who doesn't get better is the one who quits. So it's okay if they're on the B team when they're young. It's okay as long as they love it and they're having fun and they're enjoying themselves. And then you talk to them about, well, what do you control? What can you focus on? I remember growing up, right? I grew up on Long Island, and I was a late developer. I mean, I wrestled at 98 pounds in 8th grade, and I was 170 when I graduated high school. And my dad was great at saying, when I was playing soccer, he's like, that guy that you're competing for the spot, he's done. He's not getting any bigger, and you will. So what do you control? Your attitude, your effort, your technical development, your fitness. You own all those things. Do those things. Maximize those things, because you're going to grow. That's guaranteed. So I think that's a couple of things there, Amy, right? But so as a parent, just know that it's not just this year. And so fight for the opportunity for your kids to play, to get good coaching, and just be patient and instill love of the game. That's the most important thing. Yeah, is that a question? Yeah. Just not interested? Yeah, and this happens a lot, right? And so I think I was like, some kids are interested and they quit. Some kids show no interest at all. I always try to find, like, what are all the different ways that you can move, right? And so, okay, that maybe team sports aren't your thing, but you want to try martial arts. Do you want to try parkour? You want to try skateboarding or surfing or things like that? Like, I have 2 kids, and my daughter was like, jump into anything and give it a try, and my son didn't want to do anything unless he thought he might be okay at it. And it was really hard to navigate, right? So I live right in Bend, and I love to ski. And when my kids were young, we did some ski programs, and every Saturday morning, it was tears and we don't want to go to the mountain. And every Saturday afternoon, it was like, that's so fun. And we would video it so we could show them the next week, like, you actually liked this last week, right? But then there was this thing where, like, all my friends, and they were like pushing their kids into ski racing or free riding or things like that. And I just remember going, I'm not going to do that. Like, I want my kids to like a sport on their own terms. So I'll keep giving them access and showing them different things to do, but I'm not going to make them do it. And then all of a sudden, right now, I have a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old who are like, come on, Dad, it's a powder day. Let's go, right? Or the best is, of course, Dad. Hey, you always get that look. That's the dad, can I cut school today look? Right? And so I think just introduce them to different things, and maybe it's like, hey, you just got to try things, find your niche, and teaching kids that it's important to move, right? Children who are active by adolescence are far less likely to struggle with obesity. They do better in school, less likely to drink, less likely to do drugs, more likely to go to college. The statistics about being an active child are really, really, really positive. And so just getting your kids moving, and it doesn't have to always be competitive, but we do something, even if it's just we go on a walk on the beach or whatever it is, I just think it's really, really critical. Now, we have to think about things as well. If you have really young kids, we call this physical literacy. Like, we understand that we have to teach children, to read and write and do this. Well, movement isn't natural. Like, we have to teach people to run and to jump and to skip and to throw and to catch, right? Some people pick it up and some people don't. And so we have to stop treating like, oh, my kid's not just an athlete because he or she didn't get it right away. Like, no, teach it. Like, teach it. Hey, let's teach you how to do that. That these are skills that we learn. Just like we teach kids to swim before we throw them in the water, we should really teach everyone how to run properly and jump properly and catch and throw properly. So it's a hard thing. I mean, I don't have a perfect answer for you on that, but I think trying to attach the importance of movement in any way that you do it is really important. Other questions, other thoughts? Yes? Mm-hmm. So, can you tell me the sport? Is that okay? Gymnast, okay. So gymnast is the one thing, right, that like, I mean, the amount of hours can be 16, 18, 20 hours for very young kids, right? And the sad thing is most kids who go through that end up injured, right? No matter how much they love it, no matter how much they want to do it. I think gymnastics, especially for young females, as we all know now, just as a parent, is being really, really dialed in to your child, getting them in the right gym, making sure that the coach is in it to develop the human being and not just the gymnast, because a lot of kids lose their identity in it. There's a gymnast who runs one of the gymnastics gyms in Bend, Mohini Bardwai, who was an Olympian and was a gymnast here at UCLA and has tried to create a program based on everything, the opposite of everything that wasn't good about stuff that she struggled with. So gymnastics develops that amazing all-around athleticism, but you still have to make sure that they sleep, right? That they eat well, that they rest. And gymnastics is also one of those sports where, because of the physics of all the spins and everything, right, you know, for girls, prolonging the onset of puberty and all that is very beneficial for their gymnastics and not for their humanity. So it's a hard thing. And so I think being really, really in tune with how are you doing? Do you love this? Is it good? Are you healthy? You know, making sure, you know, it's, you know, are they hurting and is it something they can push through, or are they injured and they need to stop? It's a tough one. I mean, it's not my specialty sport, but it's one that I really, again, I think there's so many incredible things about it when done right. And it can so easily tip into a dangerous space if you're not careful. So, yeah, it's tough. But find the time to rest, find the time to take off, be very mindful about eating and all that sort of stuff, because eventually it catches up to you. Yeah. Any other questions on that? Okay, so let me give you a couple of ideas here. In my book, Changing the Game, I talk about how do we create this mindset that gives kids more ownership and more control, and how do we, the right conditions and good communication and competence and confidence and all these things that we say, oh yeah, we want this from our kids. And when all these things are working well together, that's when they perform their best. So I want to talk about a couple of these things. When we do this, what happens is, right, they help our kids take positive action, right? When they own it, when it's their goals, they'll go after them. They'll be more intrinsically motivated to do well. It helps them build the capacity to endure the difficulty. You can't, you know, the people making the 3-foot putt to win at Augusta or something like that, they feel fear, they feel anxiety, they feel stress. They just have built the capacity to endure more of it, right? The worst thing we can tell our kids is don't be scared, don't be nervous, don't be stressful. It's a horrible thing to tell them, because it tells them that feeling that way is wrong, and actually, no, that's the welcome to being human. It means that you care, right? So it means that you care when you're nervous. It means this matters to you. And then we just build the capacity to endure more of it, right? this is a big one. It's not my quote, but I really like it, right? And this is just life, right? We prepare the child for the path and whatever's thrown in front of them, not prepare the path for the child and make it easy for them, because at some point we won't be there to prepare the path for the child, right? And then it gets in touch with their why and their intrinsic love of sport or whatever they're doing, theater, music, whatever it is. So creating the right conditions, and one of the things that that kids talk about all the times when they're asked, what's your worst memory of youth sport, is the ride home after the game, right? Because they're physically and emotionally exhausted, and oftentimes we are, and we've got them locked in the car. And we're stuck in traffic, and we're going to make this a teachable moment. And what kids often tell us is oftentimes this is the least teachable moment. So this is a clip from a documentary called Trophy Kids, HBO documentary a couple years ago. Has anyone ever seen this before? Yeah, it's really good. We'll talk about it. This is actual documentary footage of the ride home.
Did you tell the coach to put you inside the game?
Yep.
How many times?
I was standing right next to him.
Are you sure? Because I stood right next to you.
I was by him as many times as I could be.
Dude, you're not getting it done. Let me explain something to you. If you do something wrong, do I tell you?
Yeah.
Okay, I correct it. Or I tell you so you can correct it. How do you know what to correct if you don't even know why he pulled you out of the game? What did I tell you about that? Are you scared of him or something?
No.
So why don't you go ask him? Like right now, you know we're gonna have this conversation after the game. You know it's coming. Okay, this is part of you becoming a young man. If someone does something, you're just gonna take it? So if I was to walk up to you and just slap you inside your face, what are you gonna do? Just turn around and be like, I don't know why that guy did that. It doesn't make any sense, Jay. You act like you're 10 or 9 or 8. Dude, you're just going through the motions. If you're gonna be selfish, you know what? You have other brothers and sisters, okay? We'll take you from out of that school and give them a chance and put them in a private school. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. It confuses me. What's the problem?
Every time I come back, like in the car, I always feel like I'm in trouble or I did something wrong.
Well, did you?
Yeah.
You've had more personal training than any of those kids out there. Okay? Back to the drawing board. Back up to getting early, back up inside the morning, okay? Because it doesn't make any sense. You have me driving back and forth from this school, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, for you to go out and do absolutely nothing. I don't understand why you don't get it. I don't understand it.
For those who've seen it, do you remember how it ends for that kid? He quit football. He also ended up moving out. His parents were separated, and he moved out from his dad. And I remember when I first played that years ago, I put it on our Facebook page or whatever, and there was a lot of back and forth, and people said, hey, that's just a dad. He's got high expectations of his kid. And I'm like, yeah, totally agree with that. But listen to your son in that moment. I feel like every time I get in the car, I've done something wrong. The car ride has become a prison, right? And so these people are going back and forth on it, and then this guy writes in, he goes, I was the cameraman. I was sitting in the front seat filming that. And he said, you know, the dad, great intentions, but the dad was a college football player, didn't make it to the NFL, he got hurt or he got in trouble or something, didn't make it, and all of a sudden, you know, his son was going to make it in his place. But he never really asked his son, what do you want out of this? Why are you doing it? So I think this is one of the most important things that we take into account, the state of our children emotionally and mentally in the game, after the game, right? And leave that space for them. Now, my daughter, as soon as she gets in the car, not so much now at 17, but at least until like 15, she'd be like, Dad, how did I do? Right? She invites the conversation. We talk about it. Now, when I have that conversation, regardless of whether best game or worst game, I always say three things. What went well today? What needs work? right? Or it didn't go as well. What can you focus on this week in practice, right? So we keep the even tone about it. Now, Dad, how did I do today has never once occurred to my son, that question. Never once, right? What's to eat? How soon can we eat? That occurs to him immediately, right? But then we have this agreement, like, usually that night or the next day, I'll just be like, hey, you want to talk about the game? Yeah. The emotion's gone. We're not as emotional. We're not there. Every time I've broken that rule with him, it's not ended well, right? When he was like 5, it was his first soccer game, first youth. I was so proud, the proud coach. I'm supposed to be this all-star coach, and goes to his first game, walks on the field, and goes, no, I don't want to play, and he walks off. And I was like, okay, no problem. Goes to practice that week, he's doing fine. Game number 2, this game before, lots of yelling adults. He walks out, he's like, Dad, I don't want to play. And now I was embarrassed and I was angry, and I'm like, I'm supposed to be this great coach and my own kid won't play. Meanwhile, he's like perfectly happy, right? He found like a cricket or a lizard or something like that, and he's totally happy. And so we get in the car after, and I'm like, I'm buckling my seatbelt. I'm like, TJ, and my wife goes, wham, and just across my chest. I'm like, what was that for? She's like, really? Didn't you write a book about this? Right? So it's a hard thing because we're coming from a good place and we just want to help and we love our kids. You wouldn't be here if you didn't love them. Yet the ride home can be this really, really toxic place. And so what I suggest is if you see yourself in that video, just have the conversation. Just be like, hey, I realize I've been doing this. Is there a better time to talk about it? And come to an agreement of, then, especially if you know something about the sport and you could actually add something, right? But piling on, and I think about this as a coach, this is the post-game talk when your team hasn't done well, like piling on, they already know it didn't go well. They see the scoreboard, right? So don't pile on, just step away in those moments and talk about it at practice, talk about it in the hotel, okay? Big one, yeah. It's a great question. And that's why we put our kids in sports, because hopefully we can surround them with good role models and people that will help them make decisions when they won't listen to us. I mean, I really, truly believe that's one of the greatest things. I'm so just ecstatic when my kids have great coaches who are great human beings, because I know that I'm going, what's the famous like Mark Twain quote? He's like, when I was 14, my dad was so dumb, I couldn't stand to be around the man. By the time I turned 21, I couldn't believe how much he had learned in 7 years, right? Right? So, yeah, I think we just have to get our egos out of the way in those situations and just be like, okay. I mean, I remember trying to teach my kids to snowboard and talking about all these things, and they wouldn't listen, and then they did one lesson, like, Dad, all you have to do is keep your weight here. I'm like, God, where did you hear that? You're like, sounds so familiar, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think, it's just be glad that they learned it somewhere. I think that's really the only thing you can do, and don't take it personally, right? Yeah. Either there's one there and one there, so whoever wants to go first. It's up to your child. If they bring it up, have the conversation, try to keep it less emotional and balanced. If you're not prepared to have the conversation, right, just say, you know what, I don't think this is a good time to talk about it. I'm pretty upset. I think one thing that you almost always address is if your kids do something that wouldn't be okay in your house, right? That this is just a human thing. You cursed at a referee, you spit on someone, whatever. We address that here and now because that's just not okay as a human being, right? But when they're ready to put it to bed, then you put it to bed as well. I think that's it. Let them control that conversation. So what I would say is if you're someone who always talks about it and now you're thinking, man, maybe I shouldn't, don't go cold turkey, because then your kids are going to think you're really mad, right? Just bring it up and be like, hey, like, I'm going to kind of give this time to you. And if you want to talk about it, bring it up. Yes. Mm. My my personal opinion is I would be silent. I remember I coached this one team, and these like 3 girls were always amazing at home games and very bad at away games. And then I realized that the dad who always drove them to away games was the one who said, "Hey, this team we're playing has scored 72 goals and only given up 1, but you guys will be fine, right?" And then they get there, like, "Coach, they're ready to go," and we get crushed. I'm like, what happened to these kids? So, I mean, again, if you say, if you're talking that, hey, you should be better than them, maybe their focus isn't there. And if you're talking about what they've done, their focus can drift. So I think, one of the things when we work with college teams, we don't talk about winning, we talk about competing. We want you to show up to compete, because when you show up to compete, you deal with the things that you control. So you control your sleep, your nutrition, your attitude, your effort, your preparation. All those things belong to you. And if I am only focused on the things that I control, I can be confident knowing that I've maximized these things. I don't control my opponent. I don't control the weather. I don't control the officials or referees or umpires. I don't control a lot of different things. If I'm only showing up to win, so many things determine whether I win that are out of my control. So we work really, really hard on just focus on our thing. What can we do? And if we're really good at this, and we do it enough days in a row, we're going to get better. So I think, personally, I don't think there's a lot to benefit to that. You go and lose, and okay, well, what'd you learn today? Those kids are pretty good. So yeah, I wouldn't personally. Yeah.
I agree with everything you said, focusing on things we can't control.
Thank you. He's an audience plant, by the way.
Yeah, but that's inconsistent with the focus we have on adults.
Yeah, totally agree.
Take the focus away from winning and losing.
I mean, I 100% agree. And so the only way we've learned to judge, was this worthwhile, is did we win, right? Versus, did we compete? Did we get better? And that's the problem, is you'll always find someone better than you, right? Unless you're the one unicorn who happens to be the best, right? And so but it's our natural thing, right? You call you're out of town, "Hey, how'd it go? Did you win?" Right? Versus just, "Hey, how'd the game go? How did you do? Did you enjoy yourself?" Things like that. So, I just think, even though we tend to say, "Did you win?" as long as we're also saying, like, "What did you learn today?" Right? What did you learn from this experience that was difficult, that's going to make you better at baseball or whatever you do? I think that is the key, right? That you just keep the focus on the long term. And again, I think kids usually get over the loss a lot quicker than adults do, right? They just move on. They get it, right? And your kids who play in, recess at school, like what do kids do in school? Like, they make the teams even, right? Because they like competition. You ask kids, what would you rather, win 10-0 or win 2-1 and then next week lose 2-1? They're like, "Oh, that's better," right? That's fun. But what do we do as adults? We like to stack it, right? I have this friend, Jay Coakley. He says, when you ask kids why they play baseball, what are their 3 favorite things? They say, hitting, catching, and running. And then what do we do as soon as the adults get involved? We find the one player, the pitcher, who doesn't let anyone else hit, catch, or run, right? So I just think we just, like, as a parent with your own child, right? How did it go? Right? Okay, we won, we lost, but how did it go? How did you do? How did the team do? Did you guys get better? Did you compete? Things like that. So, yeah, society tells us this because we watch professional sports, which is sport for entertainment, and so, of course, the wins and losses matter. But your kids are in sport for development, right? And there has and 99.99% of them will never once get paid for that. So why do they do it? I think it's for human development. It's for character development, and keep the focus on that. Yeah. I think the biggest thing we can do, and sort of this is my last point, is this caring and unconditional love. That my love of my child doesn't depend on whether they win or lose, and we know that. And so when I did the TED Talk, and they say, come up with an idea worth sharing, mine was the simple idea that, like, after the game, just tell your kids, I love watching you play. I love watching you compete, right? Proud that you were out there today. I got to say this to my daughter this week, who, like I said, is 17, and 3 months ago said, Dad, I'm going to do a musical at school. Doesn't sing, doesn't dance, doesn't act, and did Mamma Mia. I went to 4 shows this week. It was awesome. And I was just so proud of her, because I would have never done that in high school. But she just threw herself out there and sang in front of a crowd and whatever, and I thought it was so cool. And I sent her a note this morning when I got here, and she's like, wait, where are you? I'm like, LA. And she's like, oh, what are you doing there? And I said, you inspired me. I'm going to become a dancer. No. Tell your kids I love watching you play. And so I've said this for years, and it's not my idea, and it's not original, but it's so powerful. And I get more emails and phone calls from people like, oh, you said that, and I thought it was kind of dumb. But I said it to my kids, and it changed everything. And people who have told me, like, they called their daughter or their son in college and said, I never told you this before, but just love watching you play. And then I saw this video, this guy, Lewis Howes, did this interview with Kobe Bryant before he passed away, and I think this is really cool.
And here I come, playing, and I don't score 1 point the entire summer.
Really?
Not one.
How old were you?
11, 10, 11.
You're playing against other 10, 11-year-olds?
Uh-huh.
Or you didn't score once?
Not one.
Were you in the game?
I was in the game.
How did you not score?
Because I was terrible.
Really?
Yeah. I remember crying about it, being upset about it. My father just gave me a hug and said, listen, whether you score 0 or score 60, I'm going to love you no matter what.
Wow.
Now, that is the most important thing that you can say to a child. Because from there, I was like, okay, that gives me all the confidence in the world to fail. I have the security there. But to hell with that, I'm scoring 60. Let's go.
Right.
Right, and from there, I just went to work. I stayed with it, and I kept practicing.
I think it's a pretty powerful story. I think, number one, right, if Kobe didn't score when he was 11, it's okay if your kid has a bad game. Right? But number two, I'm going to love you no matter what. And I remember I saw this, and I just liked the way he said that. And I remember my kids going to high school tryouts, and I just said, you know what, enjoy yourself out there, and I'm going to love you no matter what. So just go give your best effort, and we'll see what happens, right? I think that message to kids frees them from, again, that burden of being responsible for your happiness, and lets them take ownership of it, because we do love them no matter what. And you wouldn't be here tonight if you didn't believe that. So if you take nothing from tonight, just do that. Just let the car ride belong to them. Just love them no matter what. And the last thing I would just ask you to do is share this, right? Share this message. It's very hard to be the one person on the sideline doing it and everyone else is screaming instructions. But to get together with your teams, with your clubs, with your leagues, and say, hey, we can do things a little differently. Even in our small community, it makes a difference. And even if your own little sideline, your team does things differently, it's very noticeable for your kids when you play someone who doesn't, and they're like, hey, I'm glad I don't play there. Those people are crazy, right? Right? That coach is crazy. Those parents are crazy. Right? So just, take that step back and just share the message, right? Share it with someone. And don't go to someone that raise your hand if you can think of someone who should be here tonight. Right? Okay. Right? Keep your hand up if you're married to that person. No, don't do that. No. Right? So I think it's really important that, just find someone who thinks like you, who is like, yeah, I get that. And share it with them, because slowly but surely you can change the culture of just your team, or just your age group in your baseball, or just your community, right? Bit by bit. And that's how we change sports. People ask me, like, oh, you've done this 10 years. Is it making a difference? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if it's making a difference on the whole. But when a parent writes me and says, you saved my relationship with my kid because sports had ruined it, then yeah, it is making a difference. And so sharing this message, any of that, I think it's just huge, right? Sport, it's neither good nor bad. It's just neutral. This is my daughter's team now, and a lot of the kids in that original picture are still there, and they're still playing, right? Sport is neither good nor bad. It depends on the adults who wield it. And if we do it right as parents, if we do it right as coaches, if we do it right as league administrators, sport can be this incredible, powerful, impactful experience that helps people not only become good athletes, but great human beings. And what I say, my business partner Jerry and I are working on a new book that comes out in May on how to be a great teammate. And what we say is two things. Like, number one, you're going to be a part of teams your whole life. Your family, your church, your work, your community organizations. So let's teach kids to be good teammates now. And number two, when you're growing up, when you're playing, when you go to high school, whatever you do, someone on your sports team, sometime in your life, is going to have the opportunity to recommend you for a job, to give feedback on you, to hire you, right, to give you a recommendation, right? What are they going to say about you, right? Were you someone who cut corners, or were you someone who did the extra, who showed up early, who stayed late, who made people around them better, right? And that's what I think sport can do. And I think it's super, super important that as parents who care, we just keep the focus on that. Not did you win the 12-year-old league, but did you become a better human being? And if you happen to have the genetics and the environment and the luck of the draw to be really, really good, then you're going to be just fine. But I've never met a college coach or a pro coach who said, you know what, that woman, that guy, incredible athlete, but what a great teammate, what a high character person, we don't want them, right? So this is where I think sport can always be a win if we develop great people first and great athletes second, okay? Thank you all very, very much. That's all my info. I hate social media. Don't tag me, I won't respond. But there's plenty of info on there. That's my direct email, goes to me. The podcast is called Way of Champions. And yeah, I have some books here. If you want, I'll sign them for you. You can hawk them on eBay tomorrow and make an extra buck. All right, thank you all so much. Any other questions, though? Because we have some time here, I think, right? But any other questions or thoughts? I didn't want to kick you out like that. Yes? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a shift in coaching now, right? I don't think, today's children have grown up in a different world. The Bear Bryant way of coaching doesn't really work anymore. Kids want to know why. They have short attention spans or whatever. I mean, even John Wooden talked about how he developed as a coach when he started coaching basketball. He's like, all my players were former soldiers. So they just took orders. And then I had Bill Walton, right? And Lou Alcindor. And they wanted to know why, right? Then I had to adapt. And I think as coaches, we have to adapt. And I think we now are getting a lot more role models in coaching who understand the human side of things. coaching, you talk to anyone, right? I have multiple conversations with Steve Kerr, with Phil Jackson, with amazing football coaches, Pete Carroll, people like that. And you know what they always talk about? It's about winning the relationship game. That's what you do, right? Coaching is about relationships. And that's what you have to be good at. The X's and O's, like no high school AD has ever fired their football coach because they didn't know enough about football. They couldn't communicate, they couldn't build teams, they couldn't build trust, they couldn't do those things. So, yeah. Good. Anyone else? Yes. Yeah. Does he like, I mean, I think also sometimes something like, you know, would he go with his friends and play basketball and it's not a competitive league, but hey, I'll go play pickup basketball. He plays in the driveway, which is great. I mean, that's still playing basketball. Like, we don't have to, you know, I think being on teams and stuff is important, but it's not for everyone right now. And I'd rather see someone play in the driveway or just go to the skate park or surf or something like that than say, oh, you have to play baseball or you have to play soccer or whatever. There's lots of ways to play soccer. I mean, being my sport, like, I think we mess it up when we think it's always got to be 11v11 in big expensive complexes. And this, like soccer, all you need is kind of a flat place and kind of a round thing and you can go play soccer. But we make it into, you know, $400 uniforms and, you know, $300 an hour turf fields, and it's crazy. So, you know, playing 2v2 with your friends is playing soccer. Yeah. So I just keep encouraging them to shoot in the driveway and go out. Like my wife was a collegiate diver at Penn State, and if you ask her what her fondest childhood memories are, is playing horse in the driveway with her dad, shooting hoops. She never played team basketball, but she would play horse with him. And I think that's a pretty cool thing. That's still playing basketball. Yeah. Yes. Awesome. Thank you all very, very much. Really, really appreciate it. Amy, any final words from you? Yeah, and tell people tomorrow morning at 9. Okay. Yep. Yeah. My timing will be better on some of the jokes. Thank you all so very much.